The ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah offers a brief pause in over a year of devastating violence, but its sustainability and Israel's intentions remain in question. In Gaza, relentless Israeli attacks have created a catastrophic humanitarian crisis, with millions on the brink of famine despite growing international outcry. Meanwhile, the Russia-Ukraine conflict intensifies, with escalating violence, economic challenges, and stalled diplomacy, requiring a balanced look at all the perspectives. Welcome to In Focus. And let's begin.
كل المستهدفين هن مدنيين.
وضع شيء مرعب، شيء بخوف.
And beginning with the fragile ceasefire in Lebanon, the New York Times has highlighted the fragile state of the ceasefire in Lebanon, with the headline reading, "Lebanon ceasefire appears to hold despite Israeli strike." The article underscores the uneasy truce, noting Israel's airstrike on militants near the border and ongoing tensions despite the agreement. While both Israel and Hezbollah seem reluctant to return to full-scale fighting, the situation remains precautious, especially for thousands displaced and unable to safely return to their homes. This ceasefire may offer a temporary calm, but its long-term viability is still in question. Joining us to explore these developments is Mr. Ahmed Maharim, writer and political researcher from Washington. Mr. Maharim, welcome to Qnews, and I would like to begin by asking you, can you start by explaining the key terms of this ceasefire and whether they address the root causes of the conflict?
After regards, I think this ceasefire is creating a lot of questions, and some of those questions actually it's hard to have a proper answer for it, because ceasefire is already, you can say, 48 hours started, but with that was going on for the last month in Lebanon, actually give for Israeli military and give to Benjamin Netanyahu a kind of victory that he said in front of the media that he achieved already what Israel was trying to do to put a lot of pressure in Hezbollah and also to the Lebanese government. The ceasefire has to be practically on the ground, give the chance to the Lebanese thousands of people. They have to be placed and came back to their home, which is not accurate for time being. So I think what happened is, as political discussion, there's some kind of ceasefire happening, but on the ground it has to be practically achieved. Hands-on people has to came back to their homes. I think Israel still has their upper hand power, and it has given a lot of pressure to Hezbollah. It is really critical, but we have to wait and find out a proper achievement, a proper solution, tangible, saying that the people are already in a peace fire situation. They can come back safely to their homes, which is not happening for time being.
Mm-hmm. Hezbollah's withdrawal and Israel's pullback aim to create a buffer zone. Do you think that this measure is genuine, or is it a temporary tactic by Israel to regroup militarily?
I think, as you give two options, the second one, what Israel is trying to do is to gain more time and to do more pressure for the Hezbollah personnel. And I think Netanyahu, what happened for more than 1 year in Gaza is forgotten now compared to what's happening in Lebanon. I think his main target is to put an end to what Hezbollah is doing and to give a proper decision for the Lebanese government, hoping that by 9th of January, a president of Lebanon has to be announced. I mean, it goes further to the side of Israeli, actually, more than the side of Hezbollah, but it could be a better position for the Lebanese government and the Lebanese defense force with the UNIFIL, they can do something better for the future of Lebanon.
But in recent days, the airstrikes by Israel have continued, even after the ceasefire came into effect. What does this say about Israel's commitment to peace?
Actually, it is very untangible what Israelis are saying, that if something will happen from Hezbollah, Israel can describe that it is already breaking the deal, which is already, I don't think it's not fair, because for the last 48 hours, I don't think that Israel is caring much about what will happen, and that they will continue having all these kinds of strikes. That's unfair and unexpected.
Well, given Hezbollah's resistance against Israeli aggression, how does this ceasefire influence Lebanon's internal dynamics and regional alliances?
Hezbollah now is in a critical point because the Lebanese government are trying to accomplish what is happening between America and France. America and France are pushing to have a good deal that the Lebanese people can live in peace. Hezbollah have lost a lot of his capability on the area, and with that kind of deal, he received a lot of pressure. I don't think he will be able to do as much as he is supposed to do in the future. So it's again, it's on the hand of the Lebanese government. They can looking for the future in a better way. Does Israeli force, Israeli cabinet will make some kind of compromise or balance to respect the deal? I still doubt very much.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Ahmed Mahirim, for your valuable insights. The ceasefire remains fragile, and Lebanon continues to endure the consequences of a prolonged and unjust aggression. And from Lebanon's fragile ceasefire to Gaza's deepening crisis, we now turn to the ongoing tragedy in Gaza. The Washington Post recently ran a provocative headline reading, "Netanyahu reached a ceasefire with Hezbollah, why not with Hamas?" The article actually highlights a stark contradiction in Netanyahu's strategy, celebrating a ceasefire with Hezbollah while continuing devastating offensives in Gaza. Points out that the deal with Hezbollah acknowledges the limitations of Israeli military power and the need to coexist with adversaries. Yet in Gaza, Netanyahu clinges to the illusion of total military victory, even at the cost of mounting civilian casualties and growing global condemnation. This raises critical questions about Israel's long-term strategy and whether the pursuit of such aggressive policies serves any path to stability or peace. And to discuss the dire situation, we are joined by Mr. Ahmed Shadid, an expert on Israeli affairs from Ramallah. Welcome to Qnews, sir. And I would like to begin by asking you, could you start by giving us an overview of the recent Israeli military actions in Gaza and their devastating impact on civilians?
You and your viewers. In fact, the Israeli government is right now living and sustaining itself by the Palestinian blood. And we have seen how Bien and Smotrich have threatened to withdraw from the government before if no agreement takes place. And right now we can see Netanyahu intensifying his operations in Nusayrat, in Borej, and in some other districts in the middle of the Gaza Strip as well. There is a continuation of offensives in Beit Lahia and as well in other regions around Beit Lahia. This renewed continued aggression carried out by Israel comes as a attempt to pressurize the Palestinian government in order for it to sit down and ratify an agreement with Israel for it to restore its own hostages. And, the Israeli media has been creating some kind of a public mobilization to the Israeli opinion. They have been telling the masses that Hamas is going to succumb and sit down for an agreement to restore hostages, and that Donald Trump is going to terminate and halt the war in Gaza. But for a limited period of time, or over the last period of time, we have been seeing different Israeli parties speaking about some kind of an imminent deal that has to do with Gaza. And, the media right there is trying to prepare the Israeli settler for many things regarding the new status quo, and specifically regarding the enactment of the next day plan. And the Israeli media disseminate different footage of the fighter of Izzeddin Qassam wearing his military attire. And in fact, Netanyahu is just trying to be ahead of the situation by once more mobilizing the Israeli public opinion and as well to pressurize the Palestinian government.
The humanitarian crisis in Gaza is unprecedented. How has the international community failed to intervene effectively, and what needs to change?
Today, the United Nations commemorates the 77th memory of solidarity with the Palestinian people, which actually was a result of the Security Council resolution number 181. This means that in the United Nations and in the international community, there is such a thing as a Palestinian state. And the developments that have been happening recently, in fact, attest to that as well. It's just the United States that tries to prevent the enactment of the establishment of a sovereign Palestinian state along the 1965 borders. And in fact, the different forces in the international community, I think, need to be mobilized to pressurize the United States to change its stances and positions. And, the International Criminal Court, we all know, has issued a ruling against Netanyahu because of his genocidal war crimes and the starvation policies that he has been enacting. And so there is definitely a transition in the international community that is in favor of the highest interests of the Palestinian people. But I would like to reiterate and say that the United States still acts as some kind of a barrier trying to prevent the establishment of a sovereign Palestinian state alongside the borders of the 1965, and they try to support Israel over and over with all they have as well. The humanitarian aid and its entry into the Gaza Strip is something that is definitely a horrendous measure that is as well supported by the United States.
I will take from what you said, sir. Now, we're talking about the international reactions to Israel. Israel's actions have actually drawn accusations from war crimes from multiple organizations. How might these allegations impact the broader conversation about Israel's accountability?
In fact, what we are talking about is the ruling of a superior judicial tribunal, which is the International Criminal Court, which in fact has adjudicated many cases and has issued many important rulings against different dictators like al-Bashir, for instance. And right now, the jury of the ICC is in fact facing some allegations and threatening and menacing allegations that they are going to be convicted of sexual assault and all of these things just to defame them and to deter them. I'm talking about the members of the jury. As well, the United States, we know, is not going to abide by the ruling of the ICC, but, you know, some countries that are lower in scale, like Argentina and other, you know, minor states in the world that don't really have so much of an impact, they expressed that they are going to abide by the ruling of the ICC issued against Netanyahu and his Minister of Defense. But still, there are some things that have to be done for this ruling to take effect, whether by the actual apprehension or arrest of Netanyahu and Gallant, his Minister of Defense. And as well, we have seen the Turkish Parliament and the French Parliament and the Netherlands as well, and Spain. We have seen how these entities, you know, started the operationalization of some measures against Israel, like, for instance, cutting some supply chain to Israel by boycotting or by trying to impede the maritime trade passing through these countries to Israel, or by issuing some requests of arms embargo towards Israel. But still, there is a great transition happening right now, happening in the international community. And this is we have, for instance, Britain, the Netherlands and France that are welcoming this ruling of the ICC. And right now there are serious pursuits from the international community to replicate what is happening in Lebanon and to mirror what's happening in Lebanon in Gaza by, I'm talking here about a potential ceasefire to be issued in Gaza.
Yes. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Ahmed Shadid, for your insights. Gaza remains a symbol of resilience in the face of oppression, but the humanitarian toll demands urgent and decisive action from the international community. And shifting from Gaza's suffering, we now examine the latest in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. The recent foreign policy article, The Pitfalls for Europe of a Trump-Putin Deal on Ukraine, raises important questions about the implications of any agreement reached without full involvement from Ukraine and Europe. It raises concerns that such a deal could actually divide Western allies and affect the European security framework. At the same time, it notes the potential for Moscow to seek strategic advantages from the negotiations while emphasizing the need for a balanced engagement to address all the sides' interests and ensure a stable resolution to the conflict. Joining us for a deep analysis is Dr. Justin Thomas Russell, Director of the New York Center for Political Affairs. Dr. Russell, welcome to Q News and thank you very much for joining us. Let's begin with the military developments. How significant are Russia's recent missile strikes on Ukraine's energy infrastructure as winter approaches?
Well, thanks for having me again. The recent attack by Russian military forces on the civilian infrastructure in Ukraine is nothing more than just a textbook war crime. The Geneva Convention is very clear that the targeting of civilian infrastructure, that being the energy infrastructure there in Ukraine, is an illegal targeting, and it's going to cause harm to collateral damage to the civilian population. I don't think that's going to be well received by the international community, particularly by European neighboring nations.
So Ukraine has reported significant combat engagements in multiple regions. How sustainable is the current level of resistance, given the extensive support that it receives from NATO?
Well, I mean, let's be clear. When this broke out in 2022, I don't think anybody thought that Ukraine would continue on a defense posture, let alone an offensive operation into the Kursk region of Russia. I think the Ukrainian military and the Ukrainian defenses surprised everybody, including Vladimir Putin and the Russian military. I think what's happening is that we're starting to see a war of attrition on both sides. The Ukrainians are slowly making some advancements and then being pushed back in other areas. We're starting to see, however, Russia starting to feel the pressure. We saw that with the fact that they brought in North Korean troops to engage in the northern regions of the Ukrainian front. That's a key sign that there may be problems inside the Russian military being able to sustain this as well.
So the Russian economy is actually facing new challenges with the ruble's decline. Could this impact Russia's ability to sustain its military operations, or will it adapt as it has in the past?
Well, again, as long as the Russians have the ability to pay their troops, get supplies to their troops, I think it is mildly sustainable. The problem is when they have an economic problem, how much is the public view going to be in supporting a continued effort and continued loss of life inside this Ukrainian conflict? The bigger problem here is also how is Vladimir Putin and the Russian military going to be able to refresh and continue to keep a level of active readiness for their troops on the fronts in Ukraine. This is going to be a continuing problem, and this problem continues, as we've seen, by the bringing in of, as I stated earlier, North Korean troops to help support Russian troops in the fighting. This is a very serious problem that I think Vladimir Putin's going to have to take a very serious look inside as to what a solution might be and how quick that solution comes along.
Moving on to the diplomacy. The diplomatic efforts seem to be at a standstill at the point, with President Putin reaffirming his stance against peace talks. What alternatives exist now for resolving this prolonged conflict? It's almost 3 years now.
Well, we saw the announcement by President Trump. He, on Wednesday, named retired Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg, who was a former member of the National Security Council under Trump's first administration. He was also the National Security Advisor to Vice President Mike Pence back in the first administration. Keith Kellogg has been a staunch ally of Donald Trump. The diplomatic efforts that Keith Kellogg has been putting out there is saying, look, there's got to be an incentive for both Kiev and Moscow to come to the negotiation table and find a peaceful solution and an end to the conflict. One of the suggestions that he put out back in June was telling Moscow diplomatically, look, come to the table. If you refuse to come up with a peace deal, the U.S. will not only continue support of military aid to Ukraine, we're going to give them everything that they ask for, and we're going to allow Ukraine to go as deep as they want into Russia. That could be a problem, but that could also be a diplomatic tool that could get Vladimir Putin to start talking.
Dr. Justin Thomas Russell, thank you very much for your analysis. The Russia-Ukraine conflict continues to evolve, and it is vital to approach the issue with a balanced perspective that considers the broader geopolitical implications. Thank you very much for being with us. And that wraps up our episode today for In Focus. Thank you very much for watching, and stay tuned for more updates here on Q News.